There's a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when you realize your biggest obstacle isn't outside of you. It's not the economy. It's not your upbringing. It's not even your lack of motivation. It's something subtler, more familiar, something that speaks with your voice, wears your name, but doesn't serve your future. You wake up with a plan. You say, today will be different. You write your goals. You set your intentions. You feel ready. But by mid-morning, the pull begins. You check your phone before finishing your morning routine. You say yes to distractions. You react before reflecting. You start drifting back into the version of yourself you swore you'd outgrow. And here's the confusing part. You're not lazy. You're not unaware. You read the books. You've had breakthroughs. You've even made progress. But still, something pulls you back. It's not loud. It's not obvious. It's a quiet loop beneath your awareness. A script running in the background of your life. A script you didn't write, but you're still living by. It shows up in your language. I always do this. I'm just not that kind of person. I've tried before. It didn't work. It shows up in the moments you delay what matters. In the silence that replaces your voice. In the scroll that steals your focus. And here's the truth no one tells you. Most of what drives your daily behavior isn't conscious. It's not logical. It's not even intentional. It's rehearsed. It's inherited. It's embedded in your subconscious. The part of you that doesn't just store memory, but scripts identity. That's why the same patterns keep showing up, even when your intentions are clear. That's why you shrink when you want to speak, pause when you're ready to act, sabotage what you say you want. Not because you're broken, but because your subconscious still believes an old version of the story, one where safety mattered more than success, and fitting in was more important than showing up fully. And here's the most painful part. You're not choosing these patterns, but you're living by them, quietly, daily, faithfully, like they're facts, like they're you. Maybe you've felt this, that tension between the person you're becoming and the patterns that keep pulling you back. You dream of new outcomes, but your actions repeat the old ones. You show up for everyone else, but keep postponing yourself. It's not that you don't care. It's that your subconscious hasn't caught up. Your identity, the deep one, the invisible one, is still wired for survival, not alignment. For safety, not success. For familiarity, not transformation. And that's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Because no matter how much you try to push forward, you'll keep reverting back unless you rewrite the script. Not with hype, not with pressure, not with affirmations taped to your mirror, but with awareness, with clarity, with principle. Because you can't outwork a belief system that's built on fear. You can't chase a new future while clinging to an old identity. You have to go deeper, to the source, to the operating system behind your thoughts, your habits, your choices. And that's where this begins. Not with more motivation, not with another productivity hack, but with the quiet decision to pause and finally ask, whose script have I been living? If this spoke to you, subscribe now, and let's begin. Most people don't fail because they don't know what to do. They fail because what they know and who they believe they are don't match. You can read every book, make a plan, set clear goals, and still sabotage yourself. Why? Because you don't act from knowledge. You act from identity. Your subconscious isn't moved by information. It's moved by belief, often invisible, often outdated, but always in charge. That's why discipline wears off, why willpower fades, why you keep returning to the same habits, even after promising yourself you'd change. It's not weakness. It's programming. And here's the paradox. The part of you that's sabotaging your progress isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to protect you. Your subconscious mind was built for one thing, survival. So it clings to the familiar, even if that familiar is small, reactive, or self-defeating. It holds on to the old script, the one that says, don't speak up. Play it safe. Success will cost you connection. Growth means leaving people behind. Discipline makes you cold. Confidence makes you arrogant. None of these are facts. They're not truth. They're survival logic, written by past experiences, modeled behavior, and emotional memory. And until you question them, they run the show. That's why change doesn't begin with hustle. It begins with awareness. Covey said it best. We are not our feelings. We are not our moods. We are not even our thoughts. We are the force that chooses. That's where transformation lives, in the space between stimulus and response. And most people never access that space. They wake up, react, perform, people please, scroll, avoid, repeat. Not because they're unconscious, but because they've normalized reactivity as identity. Covey called this living by a script, unconscious patterns we obey without question. Social scripts, cultural scripts, emotional scripts. The kind that whisper, "This is just who you are." But it's not who you are. It's who you rehearsed. You don't need to erase your story. You don't need to hate your past. You just need to recognize what part of your identity was chosen and what part was inherited. That's where responsibility begins. Covey's habit 1, be proactive, isn't just about taking initiative. It's about owning your internal world, the thoughts you listen to, the language you use, the narratives you carry. Because between what happens and how you respond, there's a gap. And in that gap lives your greatest power, choice. But choice only exists when you pause, when you become aware. And that pause isn't just useful in crisis. It matters in routine, in habits, in the tiny moments when you default to the old self and catch it. That's self-leadership. Not loud, not flashy, but powerful. And it begins with a question Covey posed often. Are my behaviors aligned with my values or with my programming? Because alignment doesn't happen by accident. It happens by intention. And here's the hard truth. Most people try to build a new life on top of an old identity. They chase success while believing they're not worthy of it. They build habits while secretly expecting to fall off. They set goals while carrying beliefs that contradict them. That's why results don't stick. Because success is not just about what you do. It's about who you are when no one's watching. Covey offered us more than habits. He gave us a compass, vision, values, voice. That's what real success looks like, when what you see, what you believe, and what you express all point in the same direction. And that direction must come from within. So if you've been trying to push through resistance, if you felt like your effort doesn't match your outcomes, if part of you is growing while another part keeps resisting, this is why. You don't need more hustle. You need more alignment. You need to stop performing your old identity and start embodying your true one. And that doesn't happen in a rush. It happens with structure, with pause, with clarity, with principle. Because when your life is grounded in principle, not pressure, you stop negotiating who you are. You lead your life from the inside out. You can repeat a new habit, follow the perfect routine, stay motivated for weeks. But if your identity doesn't shift, the old patterns will return. They don't need permission. They don't announce themselves. They wait. And the moment you're tired, distracted, or emotionally off-center, they take over. Not because you failed, but because the old programming was never replaced, just temporarily silenced. That's what most people miss. They think change is about force, about getting it right, about trying harder. But long-term change doesn't happen through effort. It happens through identity. You don't become consistent by accident. You become consistent by becoming someone who values consistency, even when it's hard, even when it's quiet, even when no one claps for it. Stephen Covey didn't teach us to control everything. He taught us to lead ourselves. And self-leadership doesn't begin with behavior. It begins with belief. Not the kind you post online. The kind you act on when it's just you and the decision. The kind that says, I do this because it aligns with who I am. Not because it's easy. Not because it's trendy. But because it reflects the person I've chosen to become. And that choice? It happens in small, ordinary moments. You get home late, tired, unfocused, and you ask, do I scroll to numb or pause to reconnect? You feel misunderstood, and instead of explaining or defending, you breathe. You listen. You respond with clarity, not impulse. That's identity at work. Quietly, powerfully, repeatedly. Because the subconscious doesn't change through inspiration. It changes through immersion, repetition, structure, symbols, emotion. You can't wish your way into a new script. You have to live it again and again until it becomes familiar, until it feels like you. That's why Covey didn't offer hacks. He offered principles, because hacks are about control. Principles are about alignment. And when your days are organized around alignment, you no longer need to convince yourself. You just follow the design you created. So here's the core truth. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. And identity isn't something you find. It's something you build. Brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. You start seeing yourself differently. Not because someone told you to, but because your actions began to tell a new story. You no longer say, I'm trying to change. You say, I'm becoming more aligned. That shift from effort to embodiment is everything. Because the more you act like the person you want to become, the more your subconscious starts to believe you. Not just listen, believe. And when belief changes, behavior follows, naturally. That's what Covey meant when he said, "Private victory precedes public victory." The internal wins come first. The early morning decision, the quiet no, the 5-minute pause before reacting, the discipline that no one sees, but that shapes everything. These aren't small things. They're identity signals. They tell your subconscious, this is who we are now. And over time, that message becomes more powerful than the old script. You don't need force anymore. You need trust in yourself. Trust that your decisions are grounded in who you are, not how you feel. Because when your subconscious is aligned with your values, discipline stops feeling like a fight. It feels like flow, not because it's easy, but because it's integrated. And that integration doesn't require perfection. It requires repetition. So if you've been asking yourself, why do I always fall off? Maybe the better question is, what identity am I still loyal to? The one who hides, delays, overthinks, overgives, self-sabotages? Or the one who leads? Quietly, clearly, consistently. Because once your identity shifts, you don't need motivation to act like that version of you. You just are. And that's the power of reprogramming. It doesn't make life effortless. It makes your actions congruent. It removes the inner war. It quiets the resistance. And it gives you back the one thing most people never reclaim. Self-trust. The ability to believe yourself when you say, I will, and follow through. That's real transformation. Not loud, not fast, but lasting. Because it's not built on hype. It's built on who you are. So how do you actually reprogram your subconscious? Not with noise, not with pressure, but with structure. Because the subconscious doesn't understand force. It understands repetition, clarity, emotion, environment. Stephen Covey taught us that your life is always organized around something, whether you realize it or not. For most people, it's urgency, or approval, or fear. But what if, starting today, you began to organize your life around principle? That shift begins with a simple structure, not a to-do list, but a daily rhythm that reinforces identity. Start with this. 1. Morning reset ritual. Before the noise, before the scroll, before the rest of the world pulls you into reaction, give yourself 10 to 15 minutes. Not for productivity, for alignment. Sit in stillness, open your journal, and ask one question. Who am I choosing to be today? Write it down, but not vaguely. Be specific. I am someone who honors my values before my urges. I am someone who follows through, even when motivation is low. I am someone who acts from purpose, not pressure. This isn't journaling for insight. It's journaling for instruction. Because the subconscious doesn't respond to wishes. It responds to consistency. You're not just writing a vision. You're rehearsing identity. And over time, that script becomes more familiar than the old one. 2. Identity habits. Don't aim to do more. Aim to act like your future self. What does that version of you do every day? Do they protect their focus? Do they speak with clarity? Do they say no without guilt? Do they create before consuming? Then choose just one micro-action a day that reflects that version. Not for performance, for alignment. A 5-minute pause before reacting. A slow walk without your phone. A choice to complete what you start, even when no one's watching. That's not small. That's identity work. Each time you act like your future self, your subconscious receives the signal. This is who we are now. And with enough signals, it starts to believe it. 3. Change your language. Words matter. They're not just labels. They're commands, especially to your own mind. So shift your language from reactive to proactive. Stop saying, I always mess this up. I'm trying to change. I'm not the kind of person who. Start saying, I'm learning to respond differently. I'm becoming more aligned. This is what someone like me does. It may feel unnatural at first. That's okay. It's not about pretending. It's about training. Covey emphasized language because it reveals your paradigm. And paradigms shape perception. Perception shapes behavior. And behavior reinforces identity. So if you want to shift who you are, start by shifting how you speak, especially to yourself. 4. Use environmental anchors. Your space shapes your state. Covey taught us that if your environment doesn't support your highest priorities, it will slowly pull you back into the old self. So don't just design your schedule. Design your surroundings. Here's how. Put a post-it on your mirror with your identity statement. Change your phone lock screen to a question. Who am I being right now? Keep your journal visible, not stored away. Name your alarms or calendar events with intention. Act from principle. Center before chaos. Speak from truth. These are not decorations. They're anchors. Visual, emotional cues that bypass resistance and speak directly to your subconscious. the part of you that responds to symbols more than logic. 5. End the day with identity reinforcement. Before bed, take 2 minutes. Just 2. Ask, what did I do today that reflected who I'm becoming? Write it down. Even if it's one moment, celebrate it. Not for ego, for encoding. Because the subconscious learns through repetition and remembers what's tied to emotion. That one celebration might carry more weight than the hours you spent doubting yourself. It tells your system, this matters. This is who we are. Over time, that emotion becomes glue, and the new script starts to stick. This entire process, morning reset, identity habits, intentional language, environmental design, and nighttime reinforcement, is not a hack. It's a structure for identity. And when you repeat that structure, day after day, your subconscious begins to trust you. Not just follow instructions. Trust. Because it finally sees that you're not performing. You're becoming. Not to fix. Not to plan. Not to evaluate. Just pause. To feel. To notice. To witness, without noise, without defense. How many times have you promised yourself change? Not out loud, but in those private, vulnerable moments before sleep? How many mornings have you whispered, this time, I'll follow through? Only to find yourself mid-scroll, mid-delay, mid-distraction by 9 a.m.? It's not because you're undisciplined, and it's not because you don't care. It's because you've been rehearsing a version of yourself for so long that your nervous system calls it truth. It lives in your breath, in your posture, in the way you say, I'm fine, when you're not, in how you hesitate before speaking, in how you over-explain to stay accepted, in how you abandon your own needs to avoid disappointing others. That's not personality. That's programming. And here's the hardest part. Most of the time, you feel the gap. You feel the weight of inauthenticity. You feel the ache of knowing what you want and watching yourself not choose it. That's the quiet grief of misalignment. It's not dramatic. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It shows up as fatigue that sleep can't fix, as restlessness in peaceful moments, as the heavy silence after another day of almosts. And even when you become aware of it, you keep going. Not because you're in denial, but because you've adapted to the discomfort. You've normalized the tension. You've learned how to function in fragmentation. But what if you didn't have to? What if the version of you that's exhausted, overwhelmed, disconnected is not the real you? What if it's just the most rehearsed version? And what if today, not dramatically, not loudly, you chose to interrupt it? Not with a breakthrough, not with a reinvention, just a breath that says, this isn't who I want to be anymore. That's self-awareness, and it's sacred. Stephen Covey said self-awareness is what separates us from all other life forms, the ability to step outside ourselves, observe, and choose. But most people never access that power, because self-awareness requires stillness, and stillness feels threatening. When you've built your worth on motion, but maybe that's exactly what you need right now. Not another system, not another motivational spike, not another goal, just space to tell yourself the truth. Ask, where am I living out of habit instead of choice? Where am I reacting when I already know what I want to do? Where am I keeping peace on the outside while breaking trust on the inside? These are not questions to judge yourself. They're questions to meet yourself. Because your subconscious won't shift through pressure. It shifts through honesty. And honesty begins with seeing. So look, gently, not with shame, with curiosity. Look at who you become when you're tired, when you're afraid, when you feel unseen. What phrases do you say on autopilot? What behaviors resurface when no one's watching? What spaces make you shrink, even when you have something to say? These aren't flaws. They're signals. They show you where the old script still lives. And the moment you see it clearly, without flinching, you reclaim your power. Because what you can witness, you can rewrite. This isn't about rejecting who you've been. It's about honoring who you're becoming, without apology, without delay, without needing permission to stop betraying yourself. There's something profound that happens when you stop saying, I'll fix this eventually. And you start saying, I'm not repeating this anymore. That's the moment when your old identity begins to loosen. When the silence inside you becomes louder than the noise around you. When you stop looking for breakthroughs and start creating them quietly from the inside out. It's not about perfection. It's about awareness. Because once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it. And once you name a script, you no longer have to obey it. So ask, softly, clearly, what part of me am I still loyal to that no longer deserves my energy? You don't need to hate it. You just need to outgrow it. Because once you do, you no longer fight yourself. You lead yourself. That's the shift. From noise to noticing. from pressure to presence, from unconscious repetition to conscious authorship. And it begins right here, with breath, with honesty, with one sacred moment of clarity. There's a shift that happens slowly, quietly, when your identity begins to catch up with your choices. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't need applause. It shows up in the way you carry yourself, not from pride, but from presence. You speak less, but your words land deeper. You move slower, but with more intention. You no longer rush to explain, because you're not seeking approval. You're protecting alignment. That's the shift most people never make. They build better habits, but never rebuild their self-concept. They achieve more, but still see themselves through the lens of scarcity, fear, or the past. So they sabotage, they shrink, they pretend. But when identity becomes coherent with action, when your subconscious believes the same story your conscious mind is trying to live, that's when the transformation sticks. You don't have to try to be consistent. You are someone who honors consistency. You don't force confidence. You embody self-respect. You don't need motivation every day. You've built rhythm, structure, peace. That's what Covey meant when he said, private victory precedes public victory. Because before the world sees the shift, you feel it in your habits, in your voice, in your boundaries, in the way you stop negotiating with versions of yourself that no longer serve your future. That's not arrogance. That's integration. When your choices match your values, not occasionally, but consistently, life stops being a fight. It becomes a mirror of who you are. Not perfect, but true. And truth doesn't always feel easy, but it feels clean. There's no residue, no pretending, no collapsing afterward from emotional exhaustion. Just presence. That's the foundation of what Covey called self-leadership. Not management, not control, leadership. And leadership starts with clarity, not clarity of goals, clarity of identity. Because when you know who you are, not just in theory, but in action, everything changes. You start asking different questions. Not, what do I feel like doing today? But, what does someone like me do, even when it's hard? And someone like me isn't a fantasy. It's who you've been becoming, one repetition at a time. This is why Covey taught us to live by principles, not impulses. Because principles don't bend with emotion. They don't depend on energy. They're solid, like a compass. You don't have to feel inspired every day. You just have to stay in alignment. And alignment is not perfection. It's coherence. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing, this is who I am now, and I don't need to announce it. That's when people start to notice. They won't always say it out loud, but they'll feel it. The weight of your presence, the calm in your decision-making, the silence that speaks louder than the explanations you used to give. Because transformation isn't noisy. It's not dramatic. It's internal, and it's earned, not through one big leap, but through 1,000 small choices you made when no one was watching. You didn't change because you declared it. You changed because you stayed. When it was quiet, when it was boring, when it was lonely, when it was hard. That's integrity, not as a concept, but as a standard. And when integrity becomes your default, your subconscious no longer resists. It follows your leadership, because now it trusts you. You're not reacting to life. You're designing it, living it, leading it. And that kind of power? It doesn't scream. It moves. It breathes. It rebuilds gently, steadily, from the inside out. There's something sacred about the moment you stop chasing who you think you should be and start honoring who you're becoming. It doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't happen because of a breakthrough. It happens because, quietly, you stop lying to yourself. You stop repeating what no longer fits. You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop asking for permission to evolve. And in that stillness, that sacred stillness, you remember something powerful. You were never weak. You were just disconnected from your values, from your truth, from the voice inside you that always knew you were made for more than reaction, more than performance, more than survival. And now, you know. You've seen the pattern. You've felt the tension. You've heard the script. And you've paused long enough to say, this isn't me anymore. That sentence, quiet as it is, opens the doorway, not to perfection, but to presence, not to performance, but to peace, not to proving, but to protecting what matters most. Your integrity. Covey didn't teach us to hustle harder. He taught us to live with clarity, to move from principle, to lead our lives from the inside out. Because when your life is designed around who you really are, not who you're trying to impress, everything changes. Your goals become grounded. Your discipline becomes effortless. Your confidence becomes quiet. And your choices, they stop asking for validation. They simply reflect your alignment. That's the shift. And it's not loud. It's sacred. It shows up in how you move through your morning, in how you say no without guilt, in how you protect your peace without explaining yourself. It shows up in how you speak to yourself, in how you pause before reacting, in how you stay even when the old you wants to run. That's the power of reprogramming your mind, not through force, but through design. You are no longer living on autopilot. You are choosing every breath, every boundary, every behavior. And that kind of life? It doesn't demand attention. It commands respect first from you, then from everything else. So ask yourself one last time gently, what script am I ready to release? What identity am I ready to trust? You don't need to answer it perfectly. You just need to answer it honestly. Because once you do, you stop performing your life and you start living it. If this reflection stirred something in you, if it made you pause, breathe, or remember a part of yourself you've been neglecting, then let this be your moment. Not to commit out loud, not to start over, just to choose quietly, intentionally, fully. Tap the like button, not for the algorithm, for you, as a sign that you're done rehearsing the old story and ready to write a new one. And if you're ready to keep going, not just with ideas, but with integration, watch the next video in this playlist. It's not just more content. It's the next layer of alignment, the next piece of the life you're building from the inside out. One breath at a time, one choice at a time, one true identity, becoming stronger, steadier, and more yours every single day.